these are companies, IBM, Microsoft, these are companies that have not only scaled, they've actually sustained through decades. And of course, there are many learnings that startups can take from that. So do, do you have any thoughts on what are the key differences, key learnings that we can take away?
So the learning is both ways. So everyone's trying to find their way. So one thing which has changed in the last 7-8 years heavily is that an ecosystem has come in place where everybody can survive, everybody can work together. So you may have something which is competing with one of my products, but there's another platform which I have which can help you scale, and we have no problem working with you. So there's a huge difference in the way we work today. It's not a zero-sum game. So that's heartening, and that's the reason why there's a lot of engagement which is happening. In terms of scaling, I think what's happening right now is that, so there are three, this is a bit of a recap. So there are three different ways you can innovate. So you have your complete high-end innovation where you find something new, helps increase the GDP, does a lot of good things to the economy, gets people jobs. Then there's the second layer where you just help it sustain, where you work on improving a customer experience and trying to make it refined. And third level is efficiency. Unfortunately, what's happening is that during this entire sequence, we keep focusing on 2 and 3. So what happens is everybody, once you, for example, if you look at some of the bigger startups who recently have gotten some funding, a lot of them started in smaller towns, whether it's Ahmedabad, some in Lucknow. There are a couple of them which came out from Calcutta. But they had to move cities and they had to come in there because then ecosystem existed. It was a decision purely which was taken keeping efficiency in mind. Similarly, when you're doing something, similarly when you're working with a large organization, there are certain companies which have phenomenal APIs, and they're selling it on the B2B space. They're as good as any IBM product, quite honestly, or any Microsoft product or any other Amazon product. The problem is their platform, obviously, because within platform immediately cost and other things come into the play, is not as, so access to customers, all of those things become a problem. So why can't they just port the applications onto whether it's an IBM, whether it's a Microsoft or any of them. So access to market, that's something which helps. The other thing what we have seen is there is a tendency to forget about profitability and operating profit. There is a monetization plan, but the monetization plan is something which you make 3 years ago, which is really sandcastles in the air. When plan A doesn't work and plan B doesn't work, what is plan C? A lot of people pull back on investments at a time when it is not showing any returns, but the returns may just be 6 to 9 months down the horizon. And so those are certain things which, for example, some of the bigger innovations, whether it is anybody, whether it's Apple or IBM or Google, it took them years to get it perfect. So that level of patience is required for it to go to that scale one, which is where I think that's a learning which.
So you're saying patience is something that's
which is
making
tough
IBM
because
take?
it's tough because when you have investors coming in and you've given them some data in terms of, so we tie up with venture capitalists, we work with incubators, and we understand the pressure those guys are under in terms of getting the numbers in 3 months, 6 months, 9 months. But sometimes the direction also matters. Sometimes the product is going in the right, the reviews are coming in well, the app reviews are great. So there have been a couple of organizations which we partnered with which did not scale at that level, due to which the funding and valuation took a hit, so they didn't get the kind of money they wanted. But if you look at product reviews, 4.7, 4.8, 4.9, and that should matter for something.
Right.
When somebody is putting in. So that's something which you probably need to be a little stronger and set expectations so that you know clearly when you're.
So are there other areas in which companies like IBM and Microsoft can help startups?
We do a lot of things. There's a marketplace, so you have access to customers, and these are big marketplaces with a lot of layers. So you can really, if you want something specific to healthcare, you'll get it. If you want something specific to retail, it's there. Any B2B organization come in, you can get 100, 150. Like we have a couple of 100 partners there who are selling their applications on our marketplace. But that's just us. And similarly, there's a Microsoft and there's a Amazon marketplace. But the biggest thing what we provide, and what all organizations now provide, larger organizations, some with a lot of intent and some as something that they need to do to stay in the game, is they provide a lot of mentorship. They provide free credits. You get a lot of access to information. So for example, how does IBM get paid? If somebody becomes successful, the user base goes up, then they reach beyond the free credits after a year or two, then we monetize. But at the same time, what that guy's goals may be very different. So he may just want to sell out in 2-3 years and just get the scale up to a certain level. For us, it's very important. So for example, if you want to improve your product, there are 10 softwares within each of our stacks which can be used to improve your product. Are you willing to make that investment? Do you have a 2-year plan, 3-year plan, 5-year plan, 10-year plan? If it's 10, we'll get along great. But if it's 2, 3, and 5, we'll probably end up integrating into one of the larger companies, get consolidated, and we'll go pitch there. So
So are these programs open to everyone? Can folks here reach out to you?
there are eligibility criteria, yes, but so there's a program called GEP in IBM. So you may want to just take a look at it online. And yeah, reach out to me. Absolutely.
Add to the scaling thing, I think with a lot of VC money flowing and the flavor of the month kind of a herd mentality. So food tech is getting funding, so let me start a food tech startup. And they're not thinking of scale, just looking at raising that one round of funding, get the media bites, get glory, and then try to sell out also if possible. I don't know, I mean, I
So,
think I've seen that quite a
I
bit.
Actually,
Yeah.
so at some point in time on December 31st or Jan 1st, somebody was going through my mobile. They saw 5 food tech apps, and the 2 apps that I had deleted was one was Healthify Me, and the other one was Moneyview. So basically, this actually gets us to our absolute worst, possible. So anything which is instant gratification, we generally use on the mobile, but anything else, very often we do not. So again, what happens is when people are building those apps, it's because although you may say that you may want apps for X, Y, Z, your usage patterns conform to a particular thing, but particular set pattern. So maybe that current trend works if you have a 1-2 year plan. But if you have a 10-year,
Yeah, I mean, I'm saying a lot of people
Yeah.
are just building a 1-2 year plan and
yeah.
looking at.
Because by the time you start liking it, so I liked Spoonjoy a lot, and then they shut shop, and it's a pain. So, anybody from the audience wants to speak about scaling challenges that they faced and how did they overcome them? Anybody has any questions to the folks about scaling? Haven't reached that point yet. Don't care about scaling. Just want to raise money.
So I have something to share here. Last week I was in last week I was in Pune, and I was I met up with a startup, and two boys, I will call them boys because they were just out of their engineering college, and they wanted to do something in the e-commerce space. So they were so bubbly about it, like, wow, we are going to make it and this and that. So I just asked them one question that, okay, imagine that you guys are doing well in the next 2 years. What will you do? So we will go to either a Flipkart or an Amazon and we'll tell them to, buy us out. I said, okay. But, people are coming with this mindset.
Right.
Quite a few startups, quite a few entrepreneurs are seriously thinking on these lines. And I didn't know how to explain to them that this is not as easy as you think. You definitely have to put in a lot of efforts when it comes to, bringing up a company. Very few people get lucky. Not always everybody gets lucky.
So earlier the plan used to be to get a job. Nowadays, let's start
Yeah,
something if I feel like it.
yeah, exactly.
I mean, there's a 1,000-day rule, right? You don't, things don't happen. I mean, very few people
True,
actually get to get payout before the 1,000-day
Before the
rule.
yeah.
Even Bezos said that if you have a good quarter, doesn't mean I did something now, but it's something I did
Correct.
3 years back, which is paying dividends now.
Dividends, yeah.
So I would always say that entrepreneurship is a marathon and not a sprint. If you want to do a sprint, then
Yeah, and
I
another
don't
thing which
know.
I would like to say here is, any startup, who wants to do well, or do not want to do well, you fail fast. That helps to think about the next startup. So do that.
So, a quick thing to add. So we remember all the big startups which came in. If you actually look at the founding date of many of those with high funding, take Practo, any of these guys, a Capillary, or I'm a little B2B biased, but yeah, they've all been there for 7-8 years, but we have heard of them only for 3. So there was about 4-5 years which went in initially when they built that foundation before they scaled, and that's something which helped them especially when they had to scale after year 5, because the best practices were there. They knew exactly what they needed to do. They had seen a cycle of recession. And so these things matter a lot because those learnings go a long way in ensuring that when you scale, you take advantage of all the opportunities, don't blow it.
So we'll move on to the hot topic, which is VC money, raising funds. So I don't know whether it's a bubble or not. Frankly, I don't care. But one of the fundamental laws of economics is business cycles, right? So it is going to cool off. There is no doubt about that. So, how addicted are we to VC money? Devaki, maybe you want to add here. I mean, what's going to happen if the US VCs start having cold feet? Are we just going to go belly up and say, okay, no more startups in India?
No, that's when Grex comes in, right? So, so I will have the flag of Grex everywhere running, up and running. So yeah, I mean, see, platforms like Grex will probably try to negate a lot of things in terms of getting curated startups, getting good investors, or we are talking about serious investors now. Initially, anybody and everybody used to come on the platform, may it be a platform like us or anybody else, and they used to just stay put there. Uske aage there was nothing.
Right.
So what? I mean, when it comes to a VC, I mean, probably one of the startups here, I would like to ask them a question that at what kind of time would you want to go to a VC? Any startup wants to answer that question? At what stage? Huh.
Yeah, I would say that once I have had, say, at least not only the break even, but at least 1 or 2 quarters of
So tell me in
reasonable-
number of years. Say, for example, you start in 2014.
Right now, I'm not in that stage, but
No, I'm just asking for an example.
For example, 2 years.
2 years, right?
Yes, 2
So-
years plus. Yeah.
2 years plus. So in that case, what happens is you started the company with some kind of seed capital.
Yes.
You have taken the company towards a working capital procedure.
Yes.
And once you start gaining or getting more working capital other than your revenue, okay,
Yes.
that is when you actually start going to investors or VCs or stuff like that. Am I right?
True.
So instead, bank will definitely not help you in terms of getting you certain kind of loans if you cannot have anything to pay as collateral
True.
or show as collateral. Now that is when you will go to a VC. The VC will say that you have a good idea, and we are ready to fund you with say 35 to 40% of stake, depending on the valuation of that particular time ka valuation which you have. Now here what we are trying to say is, instead of going to a VC, why don't you look at platforms like us? Because that is where things are going to scale up. We are going to look at, an entrepreneur can actually look at need-based funding. That is where we are going to play a distinctive role.
What
in
you're
this.
trying to say, a couple of times you have mentioned the word curated companies.
I will talk to you about that individually.
Okay.
So because I don't know if
I think
everybody is
what we'll
interested.
do
No,
is we'll
generic
Sure,
question, not
sure.
a specific
Yeah.
question to me. I'm just saying generic question. So when you say curated companies, you are not at all trying to encourage somebody at an early stage and trying to
At
take
the seed level, you mean?
little next seed level. So seed A or maybe seed B, or you can
So
say
our due
second
diligence
seed.
process is a little different.
Yeah.
What's your good name? Sorry.
Prasanna.
Prasanna, we
Yeah.
are trying to aim at going towards the secondary markets.
Okay.
Okay, so currently we are on the primary markets right now, wherein the startups can come on the platform and raise the money. But if the investor wants to exit in 2 years, how does an investor do that? So our main aim is to build a secondary market, and that is why we are pretty much sure that the ecosystem is going to help us do that. So I'll come back to you on that. We'll have a
So
discussion.
what we're going to do is we'll share the contact details of all the
Yeah.
panelists later on, and
Sure.
you can reach out to
Right.
these
So,
guys.
so vision is quite further ahead. We are not really looking at a small time vision here.
So when you say secondary market, you mean to say that if
Can we
somebody is-
can we take Greg's
Yeah,
direct
I
question
think let's
after the
do that
after the
later.
panel? Yeah. So Tanuj, I just want to come to you now. Your previous company, were you funded? Okay. So I don't know how many startups here are funded, but can you just give a sense of what kind of pressures VC money brings, and does it really change your thinking as compared to bootstrap?
Yeah, definitely. There's a very good article in ET today. I don't know if some of you have had the chance to read it. Talks about some bootstrap companies. See, once you have an investor on board, right, what you're signing up for is giving them an exit in like whatever their time horizon is, right? For an angel investor, that's typically 3 to 4 years, 5 years, something like that. VC funds typically run in 10-year cycles, but they may not invest you, on day zero. So, a VC will look at maybe 5, 7, 8 years, something like that. So once you become a funded company, you are either going to IPO or sell or, die. those are the three options, and you have signed up for being on steroids for that period of time. So because they want, so the VC strategy is basically that they want one or two big hits. That's it. They don't care about the rest. That's the fact. So when you sign up for that, you are kind of in the game of becoming a $1 billion company, or selling at a few $100 million, or or getting any kind of exit, or dying, right? So that's the big change versus a bootstrap business where it's a self-driven business driven by profits and cash flows of your own. So if you can manage that, then you get a level of freedom which is. So I've been both. 2 years we were running a self-funded company. The biggest challenges there were cash flows, right? Every month we had to kind of pay salaries, and then we had to do collections, right? Just like on the 20th we will say, okay, we have 1 CR in collections left, we need to pay 15 lakhs in salaries, so now let's call the guys and get some money. So different challenges, but you can end up building much more sustainable businesses if you kind of take it the long haul by bootstrapping it.
And what are the metrics that typically come with VC money? So if you're not focusing on profitability, what other stuff they care about?
Well, they only care about growth. So that's the very simple metric.
And that growth metric is going to vary depending on your business.
So B2B, they will want 1 million in revenue next number of years, and then you grow it like that. So your curve has to be just like an exponential curve, has to grow like that, right? So typically they will look at 20 to 30% month-on-month growth, which is which is pretty hard to get. Yeah.
Okay. Mukund, are we getting too addicted with VC money? Do you think there's a huge risk if external funding dries out?
I think it's again industry specific, company specific, and the vision of the founders themselves, whether they want to build a long-lasting company.
So are companies really forgetting how to make profits? Is that becoming a big issue?
I
You
think
think so?
I think it's a flavor of the month. I think it's a passing fad, but it's becoming tighter now. I don't think it's so easy to say I'm going to build a marketplace and these are the metrics that I'm looking at and I want to raise money. Unit economics is becoming very critical. VCs are, I think that they've been through the cycle in the US. Now they're going through the cycle in India, and the money is becoming tighter is what I see. Yeah. So, I mean, the VCs have had their own learning curve, and I think they are looking at unit economics. So, I think the cash burn model days are numbered, if I'm not wrong. Yeah.
Yeah, I think they are very, very susceptible to this funding shock. In fact, a lot of the exits happen, premature exits happen because the funding dries up, or there is some change, some problem in the macro thing or with the company at that specific point of time, and so the way startups, B2C startups especially work today is they will they'll spend like there is no tomorrow, and they'll hope that someone comes along and puts in so if I've raised 20 million, then my hope is I'll burn that 20 million in like a year, and then someone comes along the way and gives me $100 million check. It's going to correct a little bit in my view, the way it has happened in the US over the last 15 years, but not too much, right? B2C by nature is kind of in many ways it's winner takes all. So in the end, what you're fighting for is not profitability in the early stages. It's actually market share. So you want to be the dominant player, and then the profits come in. So
all said and done, with a lot of the B2C businesses today, it's more about changing the culture, changing habits, and those don't happen overnight. I mean, India was very reluctant to buy online, so all these Flipkarts of the world came in and started throwing money and giving deep discounts. So now people are used to buying online. So most of these B2C is more like habit changing kind of companies. So they need to have that cushion of burning money, but I don't know how long it will last.
So a quick number. So one of these incubators, we met one of the startups, and they're doing quite well. And their customer acquisition cost, and this is B2B, is 3 months of their MRR, monthly recurring revenue. And the drop-off rate is 50-60%, which means whatever you're going to make in that 1 year, you spend 50-60% just acquiring that customer. There is no way this makes economic sense. There is absolutely no way this makes economic sense. And every 6 months, 9 months, you go back and sell more equity, and you can't scale back in B2B. And this is one example. Then there are other cases where somebody has taken the time, and then because they didn't scale up fast enough, somebody else came in better, faster. Because at the end of the day, a lot of these are commoditized services. Somebody comes in, it's a very thin line, and you this way or that way, and there a lot of Darwinism. Yes, survival of the fittest becomes an issue, but it's also totally random in terms of who succeeds, who not. You will not know whether the call you've taken is right or wrong 3 years down the line. And this is something I can see as a little bit of an outsider. I mean, a lot of them would believe that, like for example, Mukund will probably believe that every decision he took has an impact in the end. But there are probably a lot of things in the external environment which actually influenced it. And beyond the point, you just take a call and kind of keep the faith.
So when I entered the refurbishing business, there were no mobile phones, or no smartphones rather, no mobile phones. But now internet as a medium. So in the US you have broadband, you have cable TV and mobile. You have 3 forms of internet. In India it's pretty much only mobile internet. So computers as a industry itself is like a sundown industry, and that's a macro factor which none of us could predict.
Balaji, just want to ask one more thing here, because you yourself said that you have an outsider's view to that. So I was speaking to one of my friends recently who's a researcher in the Bay Area, and he was quite bemused with the whole, all the funding news coming in. He just couldn't understand it. The economics was not making intuitive sense to people who had a perfectly, sane view of the world 5 years ago. So, how do you guys see it? What kind of water cooler conversations are you having?
So I was with IBM. I've been with IBM for quite a few years. And 3-4 years back, I was posted as the regional marketing manager in Calcutta. There, Thai industry entrepreneurs, all of these guys, Bangalore was a little more mature. So some semblance of an ecosystem was there in 2011, 2012. Calcutta, nothing. But at the same time, at that point in time, everybody was talking about multi-million-dollar valuation. This was in 2012. And everybody was talking about 10% for 1 million or something like that. And for somebody like me who was coming, he was like, what's this going on? And a lot of these guys failed, but some of them actually did quite well. And very often some of us just look at the numbers and look at the constraints because we are tuned to think that way. But if everybody starts believing that only this much is possible, beyond this is not possible, or is not willing to take that leap of faith, none of the great inventions in mankind would have happened. So there's always some semblance to some big dreamers having some huge dreams, but I think there has to be some sort of a reality check somewhere at the ecosystem level where a lot of free riders have gotten in, which is the way we see it. Because when we give credits to 200 companies, a year later only 70, 80 companies are left. Something is wrong. I mean, it doesn't affect us too much because those who work, we go forward and work with them further. But if 60% or 70% the drop-off rate of people who taken free credits from a company in terms of this thing, the company does not exist, something is dramatically wrong in the way the ecosystem is working.
So just to conclude the discussion, anybody from the audience has any questions, not specific to their companies, but specific to the discussion that we just had? Yeah.
Hi, my name is Pavan, and my question is, I'm finding it very, very hard to comprehend the thought process of VCs. One is they tell you that month on month you need 20% growth, and on the other hand they fund companies like Ola, where the economics just does not make sense anyway. But there doesn't seem to be even that customer value that's coming in. They're talking about people producing more people who will ride more cabs without any change in the actual fuel costs. I don't know how this works. And they get funded again and again and again.
People who actually have that experience.